Welcome to Distressed to Joyful, Bailey's Way. I'm your host, Bailey Reber, here to enlighten you and the rest of the world about one of the most misunderstood mental disorders out there, bipolar disorder. Each week, we're going to learn more about my personal journey with the disorder while leaving you enriched with new information on how you can help better yourself as well as those around you. Y'all, I am not sure how I missed this, but I totally forgot to announce that at the beginning of October, this podcast reached over 1,000 listens. Woohoo! So thank you, yes, you listening right now, because this would not have been possible without you. Seriously, though, I really do appreciate you and everybody else who listens to the show. It means a lot to me, and I really hope that it also means a lot to you. Or that you at least find me entertaining, if not also informative at the same time. Either works. Both would be best. Okay, so I'm pretty sure most of y'all know, well, at least if you've been listening to all the episodes, you know that I am a big fan of reading books. Let's talk about books for a second, because I was finally able to get a hold of the library's copy of Maybe You Should Talk to Someone by Lori Gottlieb. Gottlieb? Oh my God, I knew I was going to pronounce that wrong, and no matter how many times I try, I would 100% butcher that again. So I'm going to put this book in the show notes on the blog, and you can find Lori's Gottlieb's last name there and decide how to pronounce it for yourself. Anyways, I started reading this book at the beginning of 2020, and then the library needed it back because you can only borrow books for 3 weeks at the library. And yes, I am that girl who still has a library card and uses it regularly as a 26-year-old living in the year 2020. Yeah, let me repeat that. I'm a 26-year-old woman who uses a library card in the year 2020. And actually, I just want to point out that I had some fines I had to pay because this exact book I turned in a week late because it's 400 and something pages. That's a lot, right? And I couldn't finish it in 3 weeks. So I just kind of held on to it longer because they wouldn't let me renew having it out because it has like a humongous, huge hold list because everybody wants to read it, which is why I'm about to tell you to read it. I got way off track, but yes, libraries still exist. Library cards still exist. And if you're cheap like me and you want to read lots of books and not have to pay for lots of books, I highly recommend you get a library card. Just watch out for those late fees, though, because I got surprised by a $3 one I had to pay in order to get this book off hold again. So, anyways, let me tell you why I'm excited about this book. It's a book that my therapist actually recommended that I read because the book is about a therapist going through therapy. So it's a really, really interesting perspective. And wow, oh my gosh, I have been in therapy since I was 18 years old. And just reading this, first of all, it's really cool to see a therapist's perspective of their patients, right? Because they're the ones helping these people through things. Obviously, that's what therapists are for. They don't give you answers, first of all. For anyone who's never been to therapy before, just keep in mind that therapists are not there to solve your problems for you. They're there to help you figure out how to solve your own problems for yourself. That's very important key to therapy. Anyways, so having been to therapy so long, it's really cool to read what a therapist's perspective of her patients are. But this book is even cooler because this specific author is writing about when she, a therapist, is going through therapy and a bunch of life struggles and everything like everybody else, while also being a therapist to other people. Like, most therapists actually undergo therapy themselves. Like, how cool is that? I didn't know that. I think that's super, super cool. But yeah, so maybe you should talk to someone. You definitely need to read it. Now for today's episode. So today we're going to talk about family relations when somebody in the family has been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. A little background on me. So I come from a blue-collar, middle-class family that was not physically or mentally healthy my entire childhood. And childhood, guys, is from the day I was born until I moved out of my parents' house, like 4 months after graduating high school. Actually, technically 3 months. Wow. Yeah, it was 3 months after graduating high school. Crazy. So starting off, I just want to point out the fact that I did not know what real vegetables were until I was 25 years old. Yeah. So until I was 25 years old, you know those fruits and vegetables that are like they're made out of plastic and they're put in bowls to look decorative on the counters? That is what I used to eat until I learned that that's not a real vegetable, that's plastic, and you're not supposed to eat it. It's for decoration. I am totally kidding, and I really, really, really hope somebody laughed at that or at least fell for it. One of the two. I will take either. And actually, if you laughed at that, please personally reach out to me and message me on Instagram and let me know that you thought that was funny, because otherwise I'm going to feel really awkward if nobody laughed. Okay, but in all seriousness though, guys, growing up, vegetables to me were canned corn, baby carrots, boxed mashed potatoes, and canned green beans with an occasional salad every so often, like once in a blue moon. But salads consisted of iceberg lettuce, shredded carrots, croutons, and ranch. Y'all, these were literally the only things that I knew as vegetables for 25 goddamn years. Yeah. Let me also mention, I know I started talking about vegetables first, and you're like, wait, what does this have to do with anything? Remember how I started this by saying my family was not healthy physically or mentally? Clearly, the first one I mentioned was food. So I'm going to kind of go over the physical aspects of the unhealthiness, and then we're going to move through some other things. Y'all, I don't know if you realize how important your diet, what you eat and put into your body every single day. I don't know if y'all realize how important that is, not just for your physical health, but also for your mental health. Guys, I didn't learn these things, like I said, until I was 25, and some people don't learn them at all. I mean, my grandpa is still eating frozen pot pies, chicken fried steak, all the casseroles. Oh my God, guys, casseroles are not healthy. They are not. They were boxed and canned things thrown together in a dish and considered a meal. And that's cool every once in a while, like on Thanksgiving when you have cornbread casserole. Or, oh my God, green bean casserole on Thanksgiving. I'm sorry. Like, that is one of my favorite parts of Thanksgiving is green bean casserole, not going to lie. But you can't eat this stuff every single day. You have to have fruits and vegetables and grains. And when I say fruits and vegetables, they need to not come from a can. They need to be fresh somehow and cooked. And you need to have these regularly. And guys, I didn't know any of that growing up because my family didn't know any of that. I mean, I listed off the things that we considered vegetables in my home, but what we ate a lot of, we ate, oh gosh, I ate so much boxed mac and cheese, y'all. That was probably an every other day occurrence at least. Kraft mac and cheese from a box. Sometimes I would get fancy and put cut up hot dogs in it because I need a protein with my mac and cheese. And corn dogs. Oh, frozen corn dogs. When we discovered those, that was a lifesaver for my parents because if they made hamburger helper and we didn't want to eat it, we could have a frozen corn dog and frozen chicken nuggets and pizza on the weekends and McDonald's on Sundays. Lots of chicken nuggets, lots of them. And I'm not blaming my parents for not feeding us proper food because, y'all, in the 90s, we had birthday parties at McDonald's. Oh, man. There are photos of me turning 5 years old sitting in a Ronald McDonald chair at McDonald's at the birthday table. And all of my friends are around me and we all have on these little party crowns that say McDonald's and we're eating Happy Meals. And this is what we did as children in the 90s. We had birthday parties at fast food restaurants. Can you imagine that nowadays, guys? Especially with all of the documentaries and Netflix shows out there that explain to you how bad fast food is. In the 90s, it was the craze. So let me just say, I do not blame my parents one bit. I don't, because they were just doing what was preached about on TV, which is finally starting to be preached about less and less when more and more people are realizing how bad this stuff actually is for you. And then when it came to physical activity, all three of us kids, yes, I said three. There were three of us. I'm the oldest of three. We all did sports, but we were only allowed to do one at a time because, I mean, there's three kids. If there's three kids and we're all doing two sports each, do you know how exhausting? First of all, it would be just shuffling the kids around everywhere and having to attend some kind of game or dance recital or whatever every single weekend. But think about it logistically. Like, my mom was the only one shuffling the three of us around. She couldn't shuffle, like, there is no way she could have shuffled all three of us to two different sporting activities on top of Girl Scouts and church and whatever else that we did in our free time, which I think that was it, because honestly, that's a lot for three children to be involved in. Thankfully, my brother was not about to be in Boy Scouts because that really would have been a headache if you added that to the pack, right? All of us, we did sports one at a time, but depending on how long the seasons lasted, we could do 2 or 3 different sports in a year. And so I knew it was very important that I needed to exercise. I remember being that nerdy little kid when we did, I think it was called like jump rope for heart back then. When, oh my goodness, that must have been in like 2005. When you would jump rope and raise money for the American Heart Association. And I was the little nerd who learned all about why exercise is so important because I was that kid. So I knew how important it was, but honestly, I never really saw my parents exercise. I do remember seeing my mom walk on the treadmill when we bought one of those, and my dad playing tennis occasionally, but it was never really a consistent thing for either of them, now that I think about it. In my family, there was a lot of fighting, yelling, screaming, and groundings, among other punishments that happened very frequently. And a lot of this started, I mean, I can remember it as far back as like middle school, I want to say. And these things, oh my goodness, it was like Oh, I don't even know. I feel like there's a way to describe this, but basically, like, at home, behind the scenes, there was all this fighting, yelling, screaming, not getting along. Me and the siblings always getting in trouble because we were doing things to each other or just things we weren't supposed to do as a pact, whatever. But when we would leave the house, especially if we were going to church or anywhere where people we know might see us, we had to put on like a mask and pretend that everything was fine. No matter how mad I was at my sister, I had to act like I liked her in public, even if I was pissed off at her because she stole my Barbie doll or what the hell ever. And some of this was so bad that it would even happen in public, man. My sister and I were a year and 12 days apart, which sounds like a beautiful thing, right? Because it's like, oh, you could be so close because you're only a year apart. And at times, growing up in my life, it was beautiful because I had like a little built-in sidekick who would listen to me and do things that I would tell her to do. And oh my goodness, I was a bad older sister. I'm not going to lie. I was a bad older sister. Brittany may or may not agree with me, but I know that I got into trouble because I would tell her to do things that would get her in trouble purposely. Because I don't know, I guess I was the older sister and that's what you do, right? I mean, if you're older sister out there, please nod your head in agreement. And I feel you're nodding, so thank you. I appreciate it. You know, she and I would often get in fights like publicly, like at Girl Scouts or at church, and it would sometimes cause a scene. But I mean, if this is going on at home, you can only suppress it so much out in public, right? Oh my goodness. So, my childhood friend, Whitney, joined me at one of my Camp Gladiator workouts about a year ago. And we happened to be playing Monopoly that day at camp. And I was frustrated because I didn't know how to play because my family didn't own the game. It was basically banned because it caused lots of fights, like big old fights. And Whitney noticed me not understanding the game. And when I said that my family didn't have it, she responded with, "Oh, yeah. I can just picture your family yelling and screaming over that game." And it ended up with the table flipped over and everything on the floor. And together we stopped and we laughed about this because, one, the image is hilarious. Please try picturing it yourself. But two, because it was so, so true. That's my family in a nutshell, guys. Like, that was us. Shaming and blaming were some tactics that were also used for anything from controlling what we wore and what we did, or just as a method to get us to do the things that they wanted us to do. And to be honest, y'all, I'm not sure if shaming and blaming was even recognized as a behavioral tactic that is not okay until Brene Brown came around, to be honest. Because you know me, I love to talk about Brene Brown and her shame researcher title that she owns with other titles. But for real though, I didn't know about shaming and blaming until I started reading Brene Brown's works, which makes me wonder if it was even a thing when I was a kid. So, to dig just a little bit further into my family dynamic, so my dad worked a lot, and I'm pretty sure he did so to kind of escape the chaos at home, and also to be able to pay the bills for all of us. There was 5 of us. And then my mom did her very, very best to keep us entertained and fed and shuffled around to all of our activities while also working part-time at the local Church of Christ and while also battling her own mental health. Now that I'm older, I understand that they each had their own mental health problems and they did their absolute best to deal with all of this while also raising the 3 of us crazy, chaotic kids. And, they were only doing and acting as their parents had done with them. So although I don't blame them for anything that has occurred in the past, it doesn't mean that I don't wish that I could have had more help and support. So as a kid, I was, and honestly, I still am, an incredibly creative and also very energetic person. I also had a temper that would sometimes explode seemingly out of nowhere. And I know that this was noticed by many people. I know, oh my goodness, Miss Joanne, love her to death. Bible study teacher from when I was really young until I graduated high school and, stopped attending church, although she still does teach at the church. I do know that there was a time when Miss Joanne kind of pointed out that I had a problem with my anger and my temper. And my grandparents noticed it. They spent a lot of time with me. Of course, they're going to notice these things. I'm pretty sure some of my teachers did as well. And all of these things were noticed pre-diagnosis. So it kind of makes me wonder why, if other people outside of our immediate family were noticing these things about me, why didn't my parents start asking around about what they could do about it? Like, who to take me to see to help me with my behavior? Or ask other parents if their kids were experiencing the same things and, what do you do about it? And it's not to say that they didn't do this, but I feel like if they would have done this, they would have taken me to see a psychiatrist instead of me asking them to take me to see a psychiatrist when I was 16 years old. And to recap, I have a whole episode 3, the diagnosis, where I talk about going through the whole process of being diagnosed with bipolar 2 disorder when I was 16 years old. And when that did occur, when the diagnosis did come around, things within the family seemed to drastically change. I noticed that I was being treated differently. It kind of felt like they were walking on eggshells around me, and that they were treating me with the term that I've used before called a ticking time bomb, meaning they were afraid to say or do things around me in fear that I would explode out of anger. And also, after I was diagnosed, I noticed that there were more things that I was not allowed to do on my own, or I was being questioned if I could handle things on my own. And most of that had to do with the fact that I was now diagnosed bipolar 2. Some of these tasks were super minor as well. It seemed as if my parents maybe thought that this diagnosis meant that I was handicapped or incapable of doing things on my own, which is absolutely not the case. And y'all, I don't even remember being asked about how I was feeling, about how I felt about the diagnosis, about how I felt about being on medication for the first time. I don't remember being asked any of these things. Granted, that was a decade ago. Maybe I was, and in my teenage angsty years, I shrugged my parents off. But also, I have a feeling that I really wasn't. We didn't talk about hard things as a family. Ever. Hard conversations were avoided like the plague. There's a lot of things that I wish my parents and my family wouldn't have done. But again, I don't blame them for anything that occurred. Like I said, they were just doing the best that they could with what they had at the time and what they knew back then. So I'm not going to just tell you about all those things that they did. But instead, I'm going to tell you about the things that I wish they would have done. Some of the things that I so badly wish my family would have done for me, in hopes that maybe some of you listening will take this in consideration if you're in the same boat. I really wish my family would have researched bipolar disorder and tried to learn about it. And I wish that they would have at least just taken the time to try to understand it and to try to understand life from my perspective, and then see if that there was anything that they could do to help. I wish they would have put me in therapy sooner. I wish they wouldn't have waited until I ran away from home when I was 18 years old to find me a therapist. That's another story for another day. But seriously, therapy has been the best thing that's ever happened to my life, and I wish it would have started sooner. And I wish that they would have found support groups for me to attend so that I could meet other kids who were dealing with the same bipolar disorder that I was dealing with. And I wish they would have found some support groups for themselves to learn how to deal with having a child that had bipolar disorder. I don't know if any of y'all have seen Atypical on Netflix. If you have not, I highly recommend you check it out. It is a show about a kid in high school who has autism and trying to, live an average life just like everybody else amongst his autism. And his mom, oh my God, she reminds me of my mom in some ways, but the one thing that Elsa does in the show that I wish my family would have done is Elsa is in support groups to learn about how to cope with her child who has autism. And while, yes, autism is completely different than bipolar disorder, I really wish that there had been groups like that my parents could have joined to learn more about how to handle me and what to do for me. I really wish that they would have given me some more freedom and trusted me more. And that they would have understood that bipolar disorder does not mean handicapped. It does not mean that I'm incapable of doing things on my own. It just means that sometimes you have to treat me just a little differently than my siblings and be a little more gentle or a little more understanding, or ask me how I'm feeling or why I would do a certain thing a certain way, because my brain is wired just a bit differently than those around me. And a bigger thing is that I really wish that they would have reassured me that this diagnosis was a good thing, because now that we knew the issue, we could figure out how to deal with it properly. I wish they would have told me not to be afraid or to be ashamed of this disorder, and would have helped me understand that my differences from others are what make me uniquely beautiful. And again, I wish they would have asked me in certain situations that would pop up how things made me feel and helped me focus on my feelings and emotions more. Because as I've mentioned in numerous previous episodes, with bipolar disorder, we tend to feel emotions at a much higher intensity than those around us. So if I could have learned at a younger age how to distinguish and manage these a little bit better, oh gosh, I would have probably been in a better place 5 years ago than I actually was. And lastly, I really wish that my parents would have taken the time to learn how to love and care for themselves first. Again, with the eating and the diet that we had growing up, I wish they would have learned a little bit sooner about the consequences of eating garbage and the differences between garbage and healthy food. But I also wish that they would have exercised more consistently and that they would have started taking care of their mental health. I wish they would have learned all of this earlier in their lives so that they could lead by example for us. That they could show, more specifically me, that taking care of your mental health is not scary and it's important, and that everybody needs to do it. Thank you for showing up and for listening to this episode today. I appreciate you. People like you are the reason why we have over 1,000 listens so far. Thank you. So for next week's episode, we're going to talk about red flags in relationships. I know we just had 3 whole episodes of different types of relationships with those of us with bipolar disorder. Next week's episode is going to be a little bit more generalized, and it's just going to talk about red flags in relationships. That, I think, is super important for everybody to hear and listen and understand. And honestly, I wish I would have recognized these things earlier. So you'll hear all about it next week. Don't miss it. And y'all, I am loving these responses that I have been getting so far in regards to being a guest on the show. Yes. Keep sending them my way. If you're interested in being a guest on the show for season 2 in 2021, check out the episode show notes for this here episode on the blog at whatisheybellsdoing.wordpress.com. And there's going to be a sign up link there. I'm also going to post it in the Facebook group this week, so be on the lookout. These links are in the episode notes on iTunes, Spotify, or the website if you're cool like that and listening that way as well. So click on them there. And y'all, lastly, if you enjoyed this episode or have been enjoying the show, leave your girl a review. Please and thank you. Because reviews on places like Apple Podcasts specifically helps Apple to see that y'all are loving what you're hearing and will start recommending this podcast to other people so they can start loving listening too. And I know you want other people to join in on this fun, right? Please don't just do this for me. Do this for all of the lost souls out there who don't even know what they're missing just yet. Well, until next time, take it easy, stay grateful, and be joyful. Bye.